Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Kodiak Shack podcast. We have Ahmed here from BILT, and so he's the president and COO from BILT Incorporated, which we'll talk what that means. He's a commissioned officer in the Navy and did a little time with the Army, and then he's also been an adjunct professor of Middle Eastern studies back in the day. So he sounds like he's lived around the world. He's going to tell us about that and just some of his experiences in the innovation world, but also as someone who's served.
And now, a word from our sponsor. CrowdBotics Defense is a data analytics software company serving the United States Air Force. They make it easy for active duty servicemen and women to turn their ideas into products and tag team DoD adoption. If you or someone you know has an idea for how tech can speed up your team, increase efficiency, or make your life easier, reach out to CrowdBotics Defense to talk it through. CrowdBotics Defense will help you define your project scope, timeline, and cost, and work with you to secure the budget you need to build it. Any product built and adopted by DoD will be credited to you as the collaborator. Reach out to Julian at crowdbotics.com for help. That's Julian, Julian, at crowdbotics, crowdbotics.com. Also, there will be a link in the show notes. Everybody I talk to in the DoD sees inefficiencies that could be streamlined or rectified with the hard work of software engineers and people in the United States Air Force. So work with CrowdBotics Defense to make a product that you are proud of and you're happy to work with.
In the Navy. So Ahmed, thanks for being here. Go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks for having me on your podcast. It's a pleasure and honor, and I love talking with other veterans, and especially I love to talk about innovation in the DoD space. Vader, I have to also say to begin, I never thought I'd ever have a conversation and call someone Vader. I'm a kid in the '70s who remembers seeing the first Star Wars in 1977, and so anyway, Vader, it's a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, happy to have you.
Well, it's my journey in business, military, and in the innovation space is it's been fun. It's been great. I've been very blessed to have had just some incredible experiences along the way. I'm in the military side of things. I just hit my 30-year mark, and I started out in the Army National Guard. I was at Brigham Young University. I was in ROTC, and I had joined the National Guard there. And back in the day, I thought I was going to be a commissioned officer and serve active duty. And well, I just looked at the tea leaves, and I was going to be commissioning right during the Clinton drawdown. And for those of you who can remember that, it was tight. It was. I still remember one of our senior Army instructors sat me down and he said, "Well, you're not going to be able to go do the job you wanted to do, but you can go do all these other jobs," which didn't really sound exciting to me. And so I just decided not to do ROTC. I dropped it. I stayed in the Army National Guard doing a job I really loved, and I decided to graduate a little bit early. From there, I had the opportunity to go to the University of Jordan in Amman as part of the Fulbright program. And for those of you who know about that program, it's a really great program. It allows you to go overseas for a time and experience a different culture. I was studying Arabic at the University of Jordan and interned in the Jordanian Parliament. And it was just a unique experience. I was, married. My daughter was 2 months, and our parents thought we were insane. "What are you doing, bringing your 2-month-old baby over to Amman, Jordan?" And we're like, "It's fine here. Don't worry." It was right on the cusp of the internet, right, just taking off, and email was new, and so some of the communications abilities we have today they weren't quite there yet. So it was interesting, but I had a great experience there. And out of that, I decided I needed to expand my Middle East studies education into business. And so I ended up applying and going to the Thunderbird School of Global Management in Arizona. And great Air Force history, Army Air Corps history behind that base. It was one of the three fields where foreign Allied pilots were trained during World War II in Arizona. I think it was Mesa Falcon Field. I think Scottsdale, there was a field, and then there was Thunderbird Field. And so there's really interesting legacy there. We still have the control towers and some of the barracks, and two of the hangars are still there, integrated into the campus. So had a phenomenal experience there, attending Thunderbird, getting an MBA in international management, and from there I said, what am I gonna do next? And so I started applying and interviewing for jobs while I'm at school, and I ultimately my first job out of MBA school was with Papa John's International, and they were expanding globally, and they said to me, we need somebody who understands the language, the culture, and religion of the place. I also grew up in Saudi Arabia. My dad was an Aramco engineer for over 30 years. He raised 9 kids there, and I'm the oldest of the group. And so I spent the first 10 years there. And so I'd already had an experience of living on the ground in the region. And the gentleman who interviewed me said, hey, I'm ex-Army, and I know people who've been in the Army can take care of themselves. You understand language, culture, the religion, and you have an MBA, so you understand business. You're the package we're looking for. And I said, that's great. Let's go. And so I spent my first year going back and forth between Louisville, Kentucky, and the Middle East, working with a Saudi prince who had purchased the franchise rights. I actually worked with his company. He had a company that owned media outlets, and he wanted to diversify his holdings into something different. So they love American fast food over there. And for now, many people have deployed over there and for decades been going over there. But back then, a lot of people were like, you're doing what? They like pizza over there? I said, yeah, they absolutely do. So for the next year, I conducted pizza operations, as I like to call it, in the Middle East. And, we had some learning curves culturally. We had to explain to the headquarters in Louisville how things worked and how things were a little bit differently. And we had to innovate, actually. The existing model in the United States, most pizza is bought, 80% is ordered at home and 20% in sit downs. I mean, think about it. When was the last time you went to a sit down pizza restaurant? It doesn't happen culturally. We're going to watch a football game or soccer game and you're going to eat pizza. Over there at the time, it was more of a family sit down experience, and that was culture. And so we had to innovate the business model, and we actually had to create sit-down restaurants. When was the last time you had a sit-down Papa John's restaurant? Well, if you go to the Middle East, you'll see them there because the mix is flipped on the sales. It's 80% dine-in, 20% takeout. And so, again, right out of the gate, having to help my employer innovate and think differently about the marketplace and how they were going to sell was very, very important if they were going to be successful. And shortly thereafter, I got a phone call from a friend who had set up a company. I still remember what he said. He goes, hey, you remember that internet thing? We created a company. It's going really well. And we need some help internationally. Would you be willing to join us? And so ultimately I joined them as their head of global business development. And essentially, it was a software as a service company before we used the term software as a service. InvestTools had a tool that they delivered via the web. Was tools for investors, and online investment accounts were brand new. So it was an education component, and there was a software as a service component. And that's where I started to learn about software, really, and started to cut my teeth and understand that. As a reservist, so that up to that point, that's kind of where I really began to learn about innovation and then software.
Well, and that's I got to spend a little time in Jordan also, and I did the standard, went to the Dead Sea, went to Petra, saw all the touristy things, but it's amazing how many similarities there are in kind of like countryside and just different areas. You drive around the United States, especially being in California, because there's just so many different kind of foothills and deserts and things like that. So you're actually, I drove around there. I was like, wow, some of this looks a little bit like home, and it was beautiful. There were some really cool things to see that I saw in Jordan. And one of the things I wonder, because having moved around a lot, I see, if you go to a restaurant in, say, like Chick fil A, you go to a Chick fil A in South Carolina versus a Chick fil A in California, the biscuits are different. I don't know why, but they're just different. They taste different. They're more buttery in the South. And I wondered right when you said now it's pizza, in Saudi Arabia, what is that? Like, did they have the same thing with recipes change
Oh
a little
yeah,
bit? Did they change it a little bit more?
yeah. For
Yeah.
instance, we had, Papa John's has the tagline "Better ingredients, better pizza," and they do. They have phenomenal ingredients. I haven't worked there in years, but back then, I mean, from what everything I saw, it was incredible, the food quality in comparison to the competitors. And the founder was very, very um, locked and loaded on, we are not going to change quality. We're going to deliver that customer experience that I set out from the beginning to deliver a quality pizza. And so we had to ensure the quality of the ingredients met the standards of the franchise licensing agreement that they had signed. And so our job, I worked with our commissary team to see if we could source local products that met the exact same standard or better. And we were able to do that on several things. Um, for example, you've heard the term halal before, I'm sure, if you've been in the Middle East.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the term kosher, but they couldn't have pork products. So we had to innovate, and I had to tell everyone in Louisville, Kentucky, that I said, "Hey, we can't use pork products." And like, okay, what do we use? So we had to create beef pepperoni, right? And we also created chicken toppings. We started doing some things that we hadn't done in the United States before. We had to tweak and innovate for the marketplace. But we had to maintain enough of the core product so the brand was recognizable and people believed they were getting that same experience that if they had in the United States. Yet it had to be tweaked enough so that it also met local customs and courtesies, if you will, and
Yeah.
rules. You had to have things have changed in Saudi now, but I mean, you had a family section and you had to have a section for single men. Now, that is so foreign, right?
Yeah.
To the brand itself back at headquarters. So there was. That's why I say, with conducting pizza operations, you had to get smart on the culture and you had to integrate those things in. And there were other things like getting innovative and creative on delivery system. Addresses weren't a big thing. It's back then. Hey, the big house down the road next to the big tree. Turn right there, and then go down to the greenhouse on the right, and that's where Mister So and So lives. Uh, that's
Yeah.
kind of how directions were over there. And so, even though there was officially, you'd pull up and there was a mapping system, no one used it. So we had to get creative on how to do delivery. And again, these things now have been worked out by multiple fast food franchises and even local companies now. People have mobile devices, and we've come a long way. But that just really where I started cutting my teeth on kind of that innovation and coming to Invest Tools. There was a similar type of adoption. We had some challenges overseas, and the way uh, regulatory bodies looked at our product. We had these arrows, red and green, that signaled buy, don't buy. One company would say, oh, one country would say, regulatory body would say, oh, that's advice. You need to be a registered, investment advisor. And we're like,
Oh
no, we
gosh.
don't do anything. But
Yeah.
we had to innovate again and get creative and explain better what we were doing. Today, these things are no big deal. They give these tools away for free, everybody, and these financial institutions and banks. But again, it was cutting edge back then, and it was new. Um, Shortly after 9/11, I was working at this company, and like many people, I got the phone call, and by this time, I had transitioned and commissioned into the Navy Reserve, and I got a phone call, and just because of my background and skills and understanding the region and I disappeared for 2 years, and I deployed into the CENTCOM AOR and supported the CENTCOM AOR, for a lot of the things that happened right after 9/11. And it was an honor and privilege to do that and to be ready for our country at a time, when my skills were needed. I was in the Guard through the 90s, and it was an interesting time, right? We had Somalia, we just had the Gulf War drawdown, and I remember the first time I heard someone talk about, I'm getting mobilized. I'm like, he was going to Bosnia, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I remember they actually asked us in my unit. They said, hey, who would like to go through a turbo Somali course? I was a linguist at the time as well as part of my duty, and I was like, well, you can order me to go, but I'm in school, right? So it was kind of one of those things. Whereas 9/11 was a little different,
Yeah.
and so it disappeared. Did that for a couple of years. I came back after almost 2 years of deployment, and my friends had left that company I was in. There was some management change that had taken place while I was gone, and they didn't kick me out while I was deployed. And so we had a discussion, and I moved on. And at that time, I got a call from a friend I deployed with, um, and we ended up putting together a company, believe it or not, and we created some software tools that helped with data, and they kind of solved some problems we had faced while we were deployed working overseas, dealing with transliteration search. And again, we had come up with an innovative way to basically do searching using transliteration. Transliteration meaning not translation, but a name may be written a certain way in Chinese or Arabic, a different script, but we hear it a certain way in English, and we may write it 30 different ways, but it means one thing. How do you deal with that problem? And so a lot of our agencies, post 9/11, the watch lists, things like that, uh, people that were, doing targeting and things like that, it was a real problem. So we came up with a very innovative way to solve that issue, get after the problem. And we went out to raise an A round. This is my first foray into, we self-funded. We set up our company. We opened our own pockets. We self-funded, me and my four partners. It was four of us together, actually. And then we did a angel round, friends and family, high net worth individual round. I'm learning all these terms now.
Yeah.
I'm starting to do my first pitches, to angel investor groups. This is really before the explosion of the venture capital markets that we see today. I mean,
Mhm.
this is early 2000, just after 9/11, a couple of years, '03, actually '04, '05. It just wasn't that what it is today, but it was fun. I'd building a pitch deck for the first time, now my son's done that in high school and won a, third at state, and he's already built a, 5-year forecast and a business plan and a 10 slide pitch deck. And I didn't learn that stuff till years after MBA school, but it's so
Yeah.
really cool to see the diffusion of that kind of knowledge across the ecosystem of the venture capital world. And it's great because people have ideas, and how do I do that? Well, now they have some tools to be able to do that. So we were pitching, and we ended up getting acquired after 18 months. And we're like, wait, no, we don't want to be acquired. We're going to be huge. We just want an A round, and we had some very wise counsel from my business partner, one of my business partners' father-in-law. He goes, boys, he's from the South, and he said, let me just explain to you what you have here. And so anyway, we did the deal, and we were essentially acquired by a Homeland Security aggregator. It was a private equity group that set up a company that bought 16 companies, 16 or 17 companies, and we were one of them. And they thought we'd make a good mix for Homeland Security and kind of defense related matters. Um, and so anyway, we held on for a while, and then we just decided to move on, and we resold ourselves to another company that was doing data targeting and acquisition in the commercial space in the financial credit world. And they needed our tools for a little different end state than we were trying to do for the government. It was more about
Yeah.
who to send credit card invitations to. It was the same problem that they were having. And so
Yeah.
we ultimately sold to them. And So it's just a great experience. So for me, I'm going through, setting up a company, raising money, and all the different types of rounds, and how to pitch and resolve concerns, and do you sell? Do you take a little piece? Do you raise more? Just a great experience being able to do
Yeah.
that.
Well,
So
and I think it's what it does for you is provides you an experience over the years that you don't get as just a full-time military person. You think a person like yourself who spent 30 years as a sometimes full-time, mainly part-time, but then you have this entire another life and this life
yeah,
experience that you can bring to your military side. And one of the things that having spent 11 years, almost 12 years active duty, is I got frustrated because exactly what you're talking about, the innovation that was required, because Papa John said, we're going to go to this place, we're going to understand our customer, and we're going to provide for our customer in the way they need to be provided. Versus if you're in the military, a lot of it is, and I don't think it's thought of this way, but you have a captive audience. It's not about providing for your customer because you're just all service members. It's more based on, hey, we provide your service, you take the service, versus how do we do it better? So what would you say is how did it shape having your outside experience with innovating, even back before innovation was really a big thing, and then you bring that to your military side? Like, do you see that the military could have been doing better to innovate and be better at providing their service versus what they are now, and now we're innovating and it's a big deal?
you know, reservists, guardsmen, across the different branches are, I believe, like a secret weapon for our country's military. And it's because of that duality in their work experience, where they're in the military, but then they also have this experience in the private sector in so many different areas. And you know, especially post 9/11, with the amount of guardsmen and reservists from across the services, the joint force that have deployed and then been infused into the problem set. I think we've seen friction at times, right? Because people come in, they're like, wait a minute, that would never fly in my civilian job. Okay, I guess I'll
Yeah.
do it. Or if the culture is right, there's often opportunities to change things and make improvements um, where they were serving, wherever they were operating. And I think that has happened quite a bit over the last 20 years. Of course, that's only incremental changes. Let's be honest. We're all very much aware of the big challenges we have today in defending the country. Require a lot more innovation than just unit level. Let's call it unit level, squad level innovation, squadron level, company level type innovation. Things like that can happen if you have good leadership, but the big stuff requires a massive change. And this has been part of the discussion over the last several years inside the Department of Defense. I was just meeting with a client this morning, and we were talking about the 2015 speech that Secretary Carter gave in Silicon Valley, and where he talked about Silicon Valley, we need your help. Silicon Valley response was, "We want to work with you." I'm paraphrasing, but
Yeah.
and the why, and I think that generated a conversation that hasn't stopped, to the point where it's just, we have this outpouring of discussions now where we realize it's existential for the country. We have to change, and the PPB&E process that was put in place in 1961 by Secretary of Defense McNamara, it just doesn't work for us anymore. It's easy to throw the primes under the bus, right? It's a small business. All the primes
Yeah.
get everything, but look, they do good stuff. I mean, they make things and can do things that part of our industrial defense base is important. But we know that there's tons of innovation out there in small companies, people's garages. I mean, that is happening so fast that the current system doesn't have the ability to absorb that fast enough, so that we can, provide our warfighters, our men and women, and those who serve in our defense forces with the cutting edge tools that will save lives and protect the country and protect our allies. It's a challenge. So
Yeah.
this is a great this is the cool environment we're in today. I think we're finally at a point where people realize things have to change.
Yeah, and I think one thing I think we talked about previously, and maybe we'll get there in a bit, but it's like the helmet. So fighter pilots and bomber pilots and a lot of pilots have the standard. It's called a 55P helmet that they're running, and for decades. And I was talking with Joey Aurora on a previous podcast, and he said, 40 years,
Mhm.
this helmet has been like, that's all you got. And then, sure enough, innovation was like, hey, we're going to challenge this. And they built a better helmet. So, before we talk helmets and everything, so let's talk about what BILT is doing,
Sure,
kind of what the company does, and what it's providing for the warfighter.
you bet. Um, Built Incorporated as a company, we were founded in August of 2015. But Built the product actually had its life born inside of an innovation lab in Palo Alto. Um, and My current partner, who's our CEO and chairman, created the Built software as a service mobile application that we use today commercially, and also that's being used and tested inside the Department of Defense right now. And so it had a great birthplace, a royal lineage from one of the
Yeah.
big software companies out there. But it just that was the wrong place for that product to be. It wasn't the right house, if you will, for that product to take off. So my partner was able to convince his company that say, hey, let me take this thing out and move it out of Silicon Valley and our company, and let's move it on to something, some other place where it can um, grow and not have the constraints built up around it. In many ways, it's like the current PPB&E constraints and things that have been built up over decades that just block you so you can't innovate. Um, and he faced some of those same things that we're seeing today in the defense ecosystem. And and so once he came out, he called me and he said, "Hey, we've known each other since we were kids. We actually both grew up together in Saudi Arabia, inside the Aramco compound in Dhahran, and we've known each other since 1978. So, and we also went, intermediate school together, primary school, and then junior high. We went to Brigham Young University together, and then we also did our MBAs together. So we have a long history,
Wow.
and he was one of these lucky guys who first semester had a job offer from a big Silicon Valley uh, software company. We're all like, oh, and then we're all sweating it out, right, to the end of our term till we had our jobs. But he went off to there and spent 17 years learning about software and innovating and testing, and just had this incredible experience. So by the time this opportunity to create Built happened, um, and then the recognition that it wouldn't survive as an innovation in that environment, um, it, it was just a great opportunity for us to be able to take it out. So in a way, we're a startup spin out. We experienced all of the things that startup experiences. Other than we had MVP, we had our minimum viable product completed when essentially Built Incorporated started, and so that was great.
That's
Took us
nice.
about a year to work the terms out with the company, and then we were able to take the technology out and bring it into a Built Incorporated. So really, we've been experiencing we've been experiencing the um, um, commercialization of the product, if you will, since really end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And we weren't allowed to commercialize it and really sell and do a lot till then. So 2017, 2018, 2019, those were our first kind of 36 months really introducing brands to the Built app. And Built essentially is a customer experience software as a service platform where we load 3D interactive digital mobile instructions onto our platform. So think of it this way. Remember back in the day, people would send you an email and, hey, click on this link and check out my resume on my business blog. And you would look and go, oh, that's okay. That's cool. His resume's online. And then somebody else would send you one. Hey, check out our family blog, and you'd read all about their family vacations. I remember people were just blogging and doing all this, and I was like, I can't keep track of all these. So along comes someone who innovates and says, hey, let's. I'm paraphrasing the story but Facebook and LinkedIn, for example. LinkedIn essentially aggregates into one location resumes that are business nature, right? And then so much more, right? Because it's a network and you're connecting. Facebook in a similar way aggregates almost these family blogs, right? But so much more because you're connected and there's networking. BILT is a platform, and we're linking brands and consumers together in one location. And one of the things that my partner learned inside of SAP is there's a fight for app real estate on your phone. So if I was to ask you, Vader, how many brands do you think are in your home? If you were just,
Yeah, I'd say 15, 20,
okay,
maybe more than that.
okay.
Yeah.
And, having all those apps on your phone, if you had an app for every single product or brand that's in your house, in addition to the ones you like that are, how many apps do you think you'd have on your phone?
Far too
Yeah,
many.
too many.
Yeah.
And what they found
Yeah.
was in the research that they did back in Silicon Valley was there's we only use between 8 to 10 apps with any regularity. After that, we're deleting them. Oh, I paid for this. I don't use it. And it kind of hurts the brand's feelings. The brands are like, why don't you love my awesome $10 million app? Why do I only have 2% engagement? Why do I have people download it once and they never use it again? Well, that's because people are overwhelmed with too many apps. And so some of the learnings that my partner had and why BILT was created was the brands were saying to him, we need one place where that's a better customer experience, where people can interact with all their different brands. So today, when you download the BILT app, it's a free app. The brands pay for it. There's a little thing there called My Stuff, and My Stuff is what that drawer at your house or that shoebox in your closet that has your warranties and your receipts and your instructions booklets that you're like, oh, I really don't want to hold on to this, but I have to. I might need it, right? BILT now becomes that digital filing cabinet that has all that. Your warranties there. Your instructions are always up to date because they're cloud hosted, and you can upload your receipt. You can register your product, and you have a connection now back to the brand. And our goal is not to make you obsessed and sit there and be addicted to the app. You just know that when you needed it, if you used it, and when you need it later, it's stored there. So it's the 3D interactive digital instructions allow you to zoom in, zoom out. And it's just a far better experience than flat 2D paper instructions.
Well, yeah, and because that's how your warranties or anything like that work. Like, I don't want them. I don't want to see them, until I need them, and hopefully I don't
That's
need
right.
them. But it's like Wi-Fi. The moment the Wi-Fi is down, you're like, what's the problem with the internet?
Exactly.
You just take it for granted. So it's kind of nice that something does exist there. Well, because I was doing my homework. My mom will be proud to know that I'm finally doing my homework. But I was looking into the 3D interactive maps, and I was like, I need. If it exists already for IKEA, I'm going to be kicking myself. But I need IKEA to have this because I built so much IKEA stuff on their paper directions, and I was like, "Oh, this is a nightmare." So the 3D directions were mind blowing, and this is like military members are using this for tech orders and all that kind of stuff, right?
So I'll tell you. Let me segue into. So obviously we have. We started out in the commercial space. We're a best in class, award winning commercial tech. We have millions of users around the world in well over 150 countries. It's a great platform. It's a great product, great service, and we continue to add commercial brands all the time. And so going back to SecDef Carter telling Silicon Valley, we just, we need your help. And Silicon Valley said, well, we don't want to work with you. Some changes began, and you'll recall DIU-X, Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, was stood up. Handful of reservists. There was a reserve admiral, Navy SEAL, who was put in charge of that. I had a reservist that I worked with that also was there on orders, and so they stood it up and they began meeting with companies and listening, and that feedback, was taken, and they began to adjust. And ultimately, today they dropped the X, and Defense Innovation Unit is part of the defense ecosystem for innovation, and they do some things. And they haven't perfected everything. Mr. Brown, the head of it, just is no longer the head of it, and he was pretty blunt in the challenges he saw that he faced, which I think is good. Let him tell everyone, what was good and what's still a challenge. We got ways to go still. The Air Force stood up AFWERX, and I think it was 2017, and and then the Navy has Naval X, and there's Army Futures Command, and the reserves, the 75th Innovation Unit. So there's some really cool things happening right now for us. And I'll tell you, in 2019, I think it was October 2019, love LinkedIn. Somebody in my network posted, and I'm paraphrasing now, I'm trying to remember from memory, I have a 96 or 97% win rate in helping companies get AFWERX SBIR Phase 1. Message me if you want to know how. It was something like that. And I'd always told my business partner, we don't ever want to do federal. It's horrific. I have to hire a capture manager. Then we got to do a BD person. We need a lawyer who understands FAR, DFAR. We're going to have to sign up with teaming agreements, spend all this time with the primes. We're going to have to go into FedBizOps or SAM.gov, and we're going to look for opportunities, but then we see them there. They're already pre-baked, that they're just dangling them out there. Anyway, I said that whole nonsense that is part of the challenge we have for bringing innovation to the system. It's not worth our time as a startup. Let's not do it. I played that game before. Just not do it. But I said to him, there's something different about this, and I did a little research. So I messaged this gentleman, and we got on the phone, and he talked me through what's different. And something resonated with me that the Air Force was doing. I said, you know what? Okay, interesting. He explained what a commercial solution opening was. What an innovative use of the SBIR program, that instead of having tightly defined right and left limits in a requirement, right? That you now have something called a commercial solution opening, where we flip the paradigm from here's what we want inside the DoD to we know there's really cool stuff out there and we probably need it, but we don't know what it is. So let's do some fishing. Let's give a company a $50,000 SBIR Phase 1 that is a real contract. And people sometimes refer to them as grant money and things like that. Actually, it's a contract. It's an actual contract and it gives you a sole source justification to be able to then engage with other units across the federal government. And these things were all explained to me. And this gentleman who was helping us said, I think there'll be a general interest in what BILT has as an award-winning commercial technology used by Home Depot private label brands and all these other Weber Stevens grills and all these other national brand names. I think there's a use case for it. So I said, great. So I applied. At the same time as I applied, and I'm waiting to hear if we're going to be granted the Phase 1, I attend the DoD Logistics Symposium in Spokane, Washington. And there I met a squadron commander who was basically his unit based out of Hill Air Force Base. Their job was to create training and innovation and technologies that help the MAGCOMs that they were assigned to support. And I showed him BILT. And he goes, this is pretty cool. And over the course of a couple of days, we talked quite a few times. And he said, look, I have requirements for this stuff. I don't have the money and I don't have the resources. If you when you're phase one, I'll go to phase two with you. I'll sign your MOU. And
Nice.
so that was great. I said, wonderful. I said, I'll let you know. And so a week later, I think we got our phase one, and I let him know. And I think a month or two later, we signed the phase two. So here we are, March of 2020. I'm getting ready to fly from Dallas down to South by Southwest to AFWorks to pitch BILT for a phase two. And this is where you got to give AFWorks and the Air Force, big kudos. They were able to, as the planet is shutting down, they chose not to shut down that whole evolution. They continued and pivoted like 24, 48 hours to where I pitched on the phone with no slides. And very grateful, that they did that.
Yeah.
What would the easy button have been? We're
Yeah.
not going
Just
to do
shut
it.
it down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not going to do it. So we pitched there, and I'm grateful for, again, our sponsor got on the phone with me, and he said, I believe BILT has the potential. It has the potential to be in the hands of every maintainer in the Air Force. Basically, it's good technology, and we should take a hard look at it. Let's experiment and iterate through a phase two, using these RDT&E funds for research to see if there's something there. So that's how we got started with the Air Force, and very, very grateful. We're in the TAC-5 funding period right now, and we're working with one of the major commands in the Air Force. And so it's not everywhere, but I've been proactive to get out. I was just at the Lifecycle Management Industry Days to any entrepreneur that would like to, get in front of some important people. Make sure you have that event held in Dayton every year. It didn't happen during COVID, but and then of course you got to find commands that want to work with you as well. So
One, and can you kind of provide a little just background or a little color to the life cycle management, like what that is historically done and why it's so important to know those people in the life cycle management
um,
area?
so so I'm not an Air Force guy.
Yeah.
I in a joint environment, you always want the Air Force logistics folks setting up your stuff. They always bring really great stuff, and so I've always been appreciative of the Air Force, pilots, and just incredible what the Air Force does. I had the opportunity to work with the Air Force. I was an adjunct professor for 13 years at USAFSOS, United States Air Force Special Operations School. And kind of during the crush, about 13 years, and in between, I had to go for a couple of deployments, but I got to be affiliated with that schoolhouse. So I've really grown fond of the Air Force and the things that they do for our joint force, and so that's kind of how I know the Air Force, right? So some of these
Yeah.
things for me, I really I really feel for companies that have never touched the Department of Defense and they don't know their way around. I mean, I've been around the military 30 years now, both active and in reserve time, and I still don't know everything. I mean, it's like it's like
Yeah.
you hear something, you're like, oh, I served the Pentagon for a year, and you could be in one side of the building and you listen to things. Oh, I understand every acronym in that meeting, and then you go to another
Yeah.
side and you'll hear acronyms. I have no idea what they just said.
It might be the same acronym sometimes too.
Yeah, that's right. They just changed the acronym. It's like a synonym acronym, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it. So I guess what I'm saying, it's a challenging environment for small companies and startups to sell into. And so the Department of Defense has to make it easier. If they want these innovations, they've got to, in the commercial sector, we call it make the customer experience, make it effortless. Now there has to be,
Yeah.
it can't be completely effortless. There has to be some due diligence, but it's too complicated right now. And so I'm grateful that I had a little bit of exposure to the Air Force as I was starting to, on the commercial side, work with them. Air Force Lifecycle Management Center is a very important, I believe, 3-star command under Air Force Materiel Command, 4-star command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And this is where many of the program executive program executive offices are for the program executive officers that control the funding for everything. AFWorks prides itself on, hey, look, you not pride yourself. They tell us you're going to go through phase 1 and phase 2, but we need you to get to phase 3. And phase 3 means other people's money. Where's this money? Well, program executive offices have the money. And so it becomes this marriage between you need to find a customer somewhere, and then you need to find funding somewhere. And every MAGCOM and customer typically has a funding line back to some program office. And that took a while to figure out and meet those people. It was exacerbated by COVID. COVID really, was a challenge. The Air Force, like many of the services, many people work from home, and it was tough. And so I'm grateful. I feel like I've been on the road almost every week, since June, but things have opened back up. It's great. People want to see each other. People want to talk. And so you need to create that connective tissue with the people that like your stuff as an entrepreneur, to also finding those people who can help pay for it and make it a program. And it's still a fight. Like, you're fighting for budget. And what are you going to give up for something else? And it's a lot of work. It's not easy. So it takes time.
Well, and
What's that?
the horizon. Oh, and the horizon is a lot longer. So you're talking, hey, we're talking SBIRs 12 to 18 months, but like material command and lifecycle management is thinking, 2024 fiscal year budget is probably closed out right now. They're already looking at 2025. And so if you're a small business who says like, hey, my SBIR 2 is going great, I want to become a SBIR 3. And now I'm going to start talking to PEO and lifecycle command because I want to get into one of these F-35 programs or the next thing coming out. You're talking 2, 3, 4 years down the road before you actually get built into one of those lifecycle funds. So that's where, the TAC-5s, the STRAT-5s, getting the commercial SBIR 3, but just not as full scale as a PEO office, is where that stuff comes in.
Yeah, it's very helpful. And I people still complain, about certain things inside the AFWERX program, things like that. There's challenges, I just got to say the people I've worked with have been incredible. They all are trying. And, I've heard they're victims of their own success because they found and identified so many cool technologies. Some might work and others might not. And, they've told me this too. They don't have any power to compel people to give you a phase 3 and commit somebody else's budget. They don't have that authority, but they're going to try and help guide you and give you guidance to get there. Really grateful. I think the Air Force is probably the best of all the services in innovation right now. And, some people say, they're frustrated and they're bad at the Air Force. But I'm like, you tried dealing with some of the other services. It's very challenging. And this commercial solution opening is just, I think it was the game changer for at least bringing a lot of it in. So Air Force solved, I think, a getting you in piece, but now getting that to the next level. And I think this is why they're trying to get after PPB&E reform, because otherwise people are like, okay, I'll become a SBIR mill. You've heard of these SBIR mill companies, right? They just live off SBIRs forever. It's kind of crazy, but they do that because the way the system is, and that was not the intent of the SBIRs. And then there's really good stuff we need, and people know we need it, but you just can't get through because sometimes the easy button is, well, I'll just go with the known company that's been doing it forever.
Well, and a lot of those companies just become so knowledgeable of the process that they're very good at doing it. These people who've been working with the PPB&E for so long, which, do you know what the acronym PPB&E is? We use it.
Planning, something, budgeting, and execution. I can't remember the other P.
All right.
But it's
good enough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But our solution, it's a good start, is let's innovate around some of these rigid structures that have sadly been built for us. But then while we work around them, we have to renovate those structures so they're more applicable. We can't just in perpetuity, operate around the structures for us. We have to change that to work in today's environment.
Yeah, and I know, you can Google and there's articles on PPE reform. Recently retired Major General Cameron Holt, who was head of contracting in the Air Force. I mean, he's talked a lot about this. How do we change and innovate so we can get after, you know, um, the business of the day, protecting the nation, and addressing those threats that are out there. That are, you open the internet and read any news source, and they stare at you every day. And we have to go faster because our adversaries don't have these challenges. Um, they have challenges. I mean, it's not easy, but everything. But many of the things that we face that we shouldn't have to deal with, they don't have to deal with at all when it comes to innovating. Our adversaries have no problem stealing, um, and then incorporating it in very quickly and throwing dollars after it and just cutting through whatever all this red tape that we have. They just say make it happen. And again, I'm not saying it's 100% easy, but still they're moving faster. So we can do better. I think people understand that and they're trying. And Congress has a role to play in this. They gotta make some changes. They gotta apply pressure where pressure needs to be placed. And a lot of smart people know how to fix this too. I mean, so we just need to get the right people together and make this happen. It's important.
Well, and I think, yeah, and I think some of it is, the funds are at the end of the day congressionally allocated. So even if we want to change the PPE or keep funding SIBRs, the reality is like that only happens if that money is allocated to be used in that way. Um, and I think one of the things, it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of it, of the SIBR one to SIBR two to SIBR three. I mean, there's going to be fall off of companies. Not every company is going to go from a SIBR one to SIBR three because that's the whole point. Like the cream rises to the top, and then you take your best products, hopefully your best products end up being that company that becomes the new prime or something like that. So we talked a little bit before about, or do you want to talk about the helmet that you are kind of working alongside with, or you want to
Um,
do that or no?
yeah, it's really cool. This is a cool story. There's a company called Lift Airborne, and they won an AFWERX challenge. And innovative, former active duty, now reservist pilots. That, to your point, we're dealing with old technology. We want something better. And they recently they won this AFRIX challenge. They created their minimum viable product, and then they actually won a full contract with the Air Force, and that's pretty cool. And one day, one of the inventors of this new helmet, they purchased a product commercially. I think it was a barnyard sliding door that needed to be installed. And lo and behold, that was one of the brands on BILT. And the wife said to her husband, who's the pilot, Air Force pilot, said, "Look at this." I think I'm telling the story right. And they said, "Oh, this is cool." And he did some research, found out we were also an AFWERX company, and we contacted each other. And I think it was days, it might have been a weekend, I can't remember, but it was pretty quick. We got together and we said, "Yeah, we'd love to work with you. Let's get after it." And so now we're supporting them and just providing the 3D interactive instructions for this new helmet. So we're excited to help them. This is an example of two AFWERX companies actually collaborating together to make something that is going to support the Air Force. So that was
Well, and I think
my
that's
little
good
story.
because we need to kind of leverage the companies in the space, especially when they're not competing companies, when they have combined interests where it's, hey, if we can get this to the end user, we both win here. Yeah, that helmet, it's funny because, like you said, the Air Force always has like the good stuff, the Gucci stuff, if you will. And so I obviously flew F-16s, and this standard helmet that I got issued back in 2011 had a mask on it. And I wore the mask, and it was the side breathing. So if anybody kind of knows their way around aircrew flight equipment masks, the old mask was the one you would see in Top Gun, that
Yeah.
the oxygen hose comes out the front of the mask rather than the side. And then you kind of have your kind of pressure relief and all that. So that's the mask I'm used to. I get a backseat ride in a growler, so EA18G, and it's nice. I mean, this thing is Gucci. It's got everything you could want. And I was like, man, I'm so jealous, you know. And they're like, just borrow one of our helmets to fly. I was like, all right, that's fine. And sure enough, I borrow one of their helmets, and it's an old mask on my face, and it is just crushing the bridge of my nose. And I was like, oh man, I didn't even realize that other people were just like dealing with this old mask still that I thought was like a relic, you know, and the reality is like the Navy was still using it. So it's not that the masks have changed, but the helmet itself is still something that can change. And looking at Lift's kind of their mock-ups and everything for it, it looks like that helmet could be great because it's all in one. You know, it's your NVG helmet, it's your JHEMIX or your joint helmet mounted cueing system. It's going to be that. It'll be everything you want it to be, and that's what we want. Rather than right now, I have two helmets sitting in my locker. One is my JHEMIX, and it's heavy, and you have like a shelf up here. So if you ever try to look up, you just get blocked, and you're like, well, I can't see the bad guy now because my JHEMIX is in the way. Or you wear your 55P, the smaller one, without that, but it doesn't have all the nice stuff that the jet information kind of gets displayed on your face. So I'm excited about that because that's a very real feedback and change for the end users because they said this is a problem set, let's fix it, and they're fixing it, and then good things are happening.
Yeah, it's, and what I love also, the Air Force has created these spark tanks all over the Air Force, creating that culture of, hey, you got an idea, come in at the base level, and empowering airmen to think outside the box to try and come up with solutions. And that's pretty cool. And I know there's this balance, right? And you got to follow the TO, and if you don't, that's a UCMJ violation, and someone can get hurt, right? I mean, there's that aspect, but if you can create a safe space where you can tinker, where no one will get hurt, and iterate, and then get buy-in, that's pretty cool. I've read a few instances of things, airmen. 19-year-old airman, saves, Air Force $7 million on something, right? I mean, things like that. That's cool. And we know, and that's one of the great things about BILT. We have a feedback mechanism in there at the end of each job to be done where you can leave feedback, and then a frontline leader, program manager can log in and see all this feedback. So for example, if we create a particular instruction set tied to a job to be done, and there's people in 30 locations around the world that are using that instruction set on the BILT app on their command managed mobile device, right? All of a sudden, you now have 30 people in 30 different bases, right, giving feedback, and you're sitting there, right, Pat, or wherever, and you see all this feedback, and it's like, we didn't know that. And everyone's having the same issue. Step 4 is tripping everybody up. And there's the data. I can see the data. And they're giving us feedback on what they recommend to fix it. And because BILT is cloud hosted, we can go back in, work with whoever, and make an adjustment and publish an adjustment to that instruction and push it out, rather than saying we're going to reprint a manual and we're going to mail it out to all the different sites. That's expensive. That's dinosaur days. We don't do that. Yeah. There's no need to do that anymore. There are going to be like $7 billion mobile devices, they say, by 2025. It's some of the data that's out there, and that's more than there are people on the planet. I mean, we are a mobile people, and we've got to give people the tools to get things done and to go faster, because it's important.
And I think the thing that I think is such a big change, because anybody who's used, any sort of tech order or any sort of instructions to build anything, that having a different perspective can be enlightening to the point where you understand it more. And I think innovation is, seeing a problem and then making a solution. And I think what the Air Force initially did was, we have a problem. We have too many paper pubs. We have to replace them all the time. Let's innovate and make this better. And BILT is like the 9 level, the best solution. What they initially started out with was, I'm going to take a paper product and it's now going to be a PDF and it's going to be digital. And you're like, well, that's nice, but that doesn't really help me use the TO, implement the TO. It's just not a piece of paper anymore. We're BILT. It changes the way they actually interact with the TOs and the instructions.
So one of the things, just to clarify for everyone out there that's listening, we are not replacing the technical order, right? I mean, there needs to
Yeah.
be an authoritative document that ties back to the manufacturer, and that can be a PDF stored somewhere, right? But 1,000-page technical order, maybe the maintainers only use 50 pages of it with any regularity, right? So our job is to kind of look at the pieces they use, and actually the technical order system. There's a 150-page document that explains what the technical order system is. I skimmed it. I had someone else read it for me. I didn't want to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
And basically what it comes down to is BILT is classified as an e-tool. So we don't replace the tech order, but we are an e-tool to help them do their job. So just like a maintainer might have a bag of tools, right, for their particular whatever job to be done that they've been trained for in their AFSC code job. BILT's just another tool now in their toolbox that helps them do their job. And if they ever need to reference that technical order, they should. They absolutely should. I mean, we're not telling them not to, but if there are certain pieces that we could help with and enhance and make it safer and faster to help increase readiness and increase the learning curve, and not only that, multifunctional airmen, cross training them to do things because it's so visual, it's so interactive. I mean, you look at this stuff and you might say to yourself, I didn't think I could ever do a bore side alignment, but I'm looking here and I can do that no problem. It's very, very clear.
Yeah.
And so we're excited to start this process and do more. And one of the things I've heard is, that'll take forever. It'll cost for too much. And I'm like, well, look, here's the deal. How long is it going to take to digitize the entire DoD? It'll take decades. There's a Go Green initiative, reduce paper. BILT helps with that. Because how about you just not print those in paper anymore, but keep it 2D PDF and store it somewhere, and you can reference it when you need it. And then you have, and also the digitizing of the government. So there's these two things: digitizing and going green. BILT helps with all that. That's just kind of pieces of an overarching mandate that all the services have been told to work on. And we'll start. Give us your low-hanging fruit. What's your pain points? So if you have 10,000 instructions you need done, well, tell us the first 1,000 that you want to start with, and over time we'll get them done. It's not an overnight thing, and the good thing is they will all be cloud hosted at some point. You'll have it, so we can go back in and touch them and adjust them.
One, and I don't know if maintenance does the same thing. So pilots, which new pilots, now I'm the old guy, I've even got some gray in this beard. But the pilots, what we would have, it's called a page count. And literally, imagine a bigger waste of time of a squadron of fighter pilots, but every pilot grabs all of their paper pubs and they sit down in a room together, and one guy who's already gone through every single page of his publications to make sure every page is there, because there's page, C10, C10.1, and C10.2. But if you're the only one and you just see C10 and C11, you don't realize that 10.1 and 10.2 should be.
Wow.
So you have a squadron full of pilots sitting there, and then they go, page 1, change 4. Page 2, change 3. Yeah. And you literally go through and he reads every single page, and every pilot's like, oh, wait, I'm missing page, 7. I have change 2 instead of change 6. And this was every quarter, maybe every 6 months, but we would do this. So we're not only talking about saving paper, we are saving hours and hours and hours of time just ensuring the publication is accurate to the digital source document, where now you're saying, leave it as a PDF, no more page counts. It's just a new PDF will drop and a new cloud-based e-tool will show up and it's accurate. Why? Because we built it accurate and we don't have to worry about a page getting ripped out one random day.
Yeah, and we'll tailor this to what you need, right? Again, there are some places where in the 3D interactive instruction we have the PDF right there, so you can click and reference the PDF, blow it up 2D, and then you can move into the 3D and play it there as well. So,
And I think there's the interactive nature of it because again, every platform has it's called a -1 checklist. So it's your chapter 3 of a -1 is the emergencies, so abnormal procedures, and every pilot has that in the plane with them. And then an abnormal procedure happens, and then you flip to the page, and you're just going through a PDF now. So it used to be paper, now it's digital, but making those better, making them more user friendly for a person, especially single seat, who's I have to fly an airplane, I have to, or follow someone else who has the emergency while referencing these checklists, while doing them correctly in the steps, and then making sure I don't run into other people or
yeah,
violate airspace or, all those things. Like having a useful e-tool or checklist that you can reference is, I mean, there's so many uses. Like people have told you before,
yeah.
there are definitely some spaces for them.
We'd love to help. I
What
mean, again, we don't know everything about everything. Obviously, I mean, there's an F-16 and what you're working on and flying. I mean, it's very important to do that right. But we have the tool; it's available. So
Mhm.
we're excited to sit down with the different customers in the Air Force and discuss with them how we can support their operations with this e-tool. And we know there'll be things that that maybe won't make sense to do, but I think there's enough out there that if we can impact, let's say 50% of everything out there, is that enough to move the readiness needle, percentage points? Is it worth it then? I think it is. So
Well, and when you're talking about working with, I mean, multi-million dollar machines, like a B2. If someone does maintenance wrong on a B2
yeah,
because they didn't understand the tech order and it crashes, that's what,
yeah,
$2 billion. So that's the thing where it's
yeah,
very, very quickly with those kind of machines can the price tag become very noticeable of like, hey, this much money saved. I mean, perfect example is uh, in at least in the F-16, all of the covers for all of the static and dynamic air, like pitot tubes and all the stuff that tells a jet how high it is, how fast it is. One of the maintainers was like, "Hey, let's connect them all with a cable." Because sure enough, one got left on and it got sucked down a motor, and it's like a $4 million motor. And you're like, right there, if we just save one motor, we save the Air Force $4 million.
yeah,
So it's an easy one. What's with the green initiative stuff? That's a DoD thing because I hadn't really heard about
yeah.
this
I
before.
mean, you can go online. You can see there's been several, multiple places where uh, the government says we need to reduce our carbon footprint, right? And
Yeah.
there's a government paper work reduction act, right? And filling out forms. So this is just a general thing where why we just need to digitize things more. It's a general
Yeah.
trend across the federal government. It's been going on for quite a while now. So um, I think it plays into one of the ancillary benefits of BILT. Our
Yeah.
core focus is to number one, help improve the experience of an individual who has to do some kind of procedure and help them through that, make it faster, safer, quicker, increase knowledge acquisition, or speed it up. But then we also, because they're digital, do you really need to print the manual anymore? As opposed to, hey, now we just have a 2D PDF library reference where it sits, as opposed to having to print it out. It may be for a lot of things you don't ever have to print again. It may be for some things you still need to print. Years ago, I was out at the Wright-Patterson at Air Force Research Lab, and I was talking to someone, and they said, just in conversation, they were telling me how many manuals are on a C-17 and the weight of those manuals. Now, this was the conversation. They said, yeah, if we could get rid of all those manuals on a C-17, and replace them with, everything kind of digitized and, maybe 3 or 4 for redundancy, um, you know, uh, notepads or iPads or whatever device you're using, that actually reduces weight. You can save fuel. Now, not a pilot. I don't know. I don't know at what
Yeah.
point you have to, how much weight, that you really save, but I guess it was an interesting conversation and they brought that up. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking from personal experience, I've never flown the C-17, but so we're talking C-17 is a massive airplane, probably even more publications, but single seat, small F-16 cockpit, and they say, hey, you are going to fly from wherever. I'm going to fly from South Carolina to Lodges, which is like off the coast of Portugal. And so they say, here's 2 Ziploc bags full of paper publications because you need every paper publication from where you currently are
mm,
all the way to across the Atlantic to the other side where you're going to land. And they're like, all right, so keep track of these because this is what you got. And then we always call it building your nest. You're literally like, okay, I'm going to put a paper up here and I'm going to put a book up there. And they're literally like sitting all around the
oh my
cockpit.
gosh.
And you're like, oh yeah, but this was what we would do. We would literally have like, okay, that is for the next leg. I won't need any of those pubs. Throw them in the travel pod. That's outside of the
Mm,
cockpit. The rest of them are sitting around me. And then it's just by the time you get there, it's like empty Snickers wrappers and piddle packs and papers like strewn about because you've ripped them out because you were so busy and you
yeah.
accident. So yeah, the digitization of stuff is
Yeah.
awesome. And the next step beyond is we move from PDFs to something more user friendly and more helpful. If you have kind of a parting shot or any sort of knowledge that you've learned before we get out of here, what would you kind of say to your fellow innovators in the cyberspace and DoD innovation?
It just takes persistence. It's rarely do you get it. Rarely does it all align, and it happens very quickly. You hear about those every now and then. Don't get discouraged. I mean, it just takes time, and find some help. I've reached out and gotten help, consultants, people who understand this way better than I do. And so, if, try and get it validated. Number one, if people validate that, hey, yeah, this could be used, then get some help. If you don't already have that help on staff, because it's just very difficult to navigate. And then get out there, find out the events to be at. We're going to be at the Air Force Association show coming up. We were just at Lifecycle Industry Days. We'll be at the DoD Logistics Symposium again. For the Army, we'll be at AUSA. That's coming up. And you have to get out there and meet folks, and especially for those companies that don't have strong ties already to the military, you've got to create those ties. And so it's not
Yeah,
without its challenges. You got to have the resources to do that. And but you know, it's don't give up. I mean, you think of Alexander Graham Bell. How many times did he sit in his lab and iterate and fail and iterate and fail. I mean, it's kind of the famous innovation stories that's used over and over. But it just takes time. You know, everybody,
yeah.
good luck. Our country needs the good innovation that you're creating, and don't give up.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'll be at some of those events this next year once I get through this C Model TX. But if people want to reach out and talk to you about Built or just kind of say thank you for serving the country for 30 years, how would you want them to do that?
Um, they can just reach out to us. Find me on LinkedIn. Um, it's a really easy way to get me, and I respond. I check LinkedIn all the time. So I'd say that's probably the fastest and easiest way to get me. You can also hit us up on the website. We just have a little message thing there. You can just go in there and say, "Hey, I saw your podcast. I'd love to chat with Ahmed," and that will just get sent to me. So we're happy to talk to anyone. Um, And we're happy to help anyone who is in need of 3D interactive instructions. If you think we can support you in that way, or if you just have some questions on innovation and how to navigate, I'm always happy to help out another entrepreneur with any contacts that I have that I've developed over the last couple of years. We got to speed this up. So
Yeah, I couldn't
gotta
agree
pay it
more.
back.
Well, and everybody, you can contact us at info@kodiakshack.com. Check out our website, kodiakshack.com. We should have, by the time this airs, rolled out our testimonials so you can see some of the good stuff that's happened for companies that have come on the show. If you'd like to join us on the show, everyone please like and subscribe and share all this content, because the only way we kind of get the word out is by telling our friends. So Ahmed, thanks again for being on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Vader. To you and Bender both.
Bye, everybody.